I'm here today with the Venerable Myungan Sunam, who is the abbot of the Soshimsa Zen Center. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for allowing us to be here. I have to start out with a very basic, simple question, so I hope you'll excuse me. But what is the proper way to address a monk?
So we are from the Korean Zen tradition, which means you address any Korean monk by a title sunim.
Sinyam?
Sunim.
Sinyam.
Yes. And it's a universal way. So if there's 15 of us and you say sunim, they all turn. So the English appropriate definition, if you will, is venerable. But we use sunim because the venerable is a little bit of a heavy title that lays heavily on one's shoulder. So we just stick with sunim. Myungan sunim is perfect and perfectly pronounced.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. So can you please explain the mission and the purpose of the center and your role here?
I am the abbot, which means I am the head monk. I'm also sort of 1 foot in the secular world and 1 foot in the monastic world. The Zen Center itself, we like to think of it as a one-stop shop for mind, body, and spirit. And we like to address that through the plethora of programs that we have available. So obviously we do meditation, which affects the mind, and wellness. All these are interwoven with one another. We do have health exercise programs. We have, of course, Buddhist services and prayer services. We have programs for the young, for the old. So anything that pertains to our psychological, emotional, spiritual well-being, we hope to have something available for people.
So it truly encompasses the whole mind, body, spirit.
Absolutely. Yes.
Interesting, very interesting. And the word Soshimsa, does that have a particular meaning?
Yes, we are big into meanings and the things that words point to realities. And in this case, so could be interpreted as small, but it is small in a way that a seed of a sequoia tree is small. Seemingly small to the eye, but holds within it this grandeur. And so small, so shim means mind. So if we have the mind that attends to details, the mind that from moment to moment changes, and on and on and on, there's a lot of philosophy behind it. So, and then sa means temple.
Temple. So it's small mind temple.
Yes.
Small mind temple.
Which, as you could see, doesn't translate well into English,
No.
because a small mind in English is not a good thing.
No, definitely not. Well, that leads me to the next word, which is Zen. And Zen is really used as a slang term in our culture. You know, I've had a Zen experience at the spa, or I'm so Zen. But what does Zen really mean?
So the purely Zen means meditation. However, in this context, Zen is a whole philosophy and a methodology aimed at trying to find the one in particular haunting question, namely, who am I? Not this body, me, not my name, me, not my occupation, but truly fundamentally, who am I?
Interesting. Wow. And we'll be right back. So we've talked about meditation for the general population and addiction recovery. What other population would meditation serve?
We do have a program for children, and children come into this world in what we think is in a state of being a pure, clean slate. But they have their own personalities. In Zen, we do believe in reincarnation, so they also have some residual idiosyncrasies from their past lives. Now, having said that, they do not have what adults have, is this baggage of this particular life and all of the experiences, all of the points of views, the perspectives, the upbringing that covers up their true nature. So we have a chance with the population of children to instill in them, if you will, or train them and teach them the ability to manage their emotional state, the ability to stay focused. And of course, what I believe is truly the biggest thing that we need is compassion in the hearts of children that are coming into this world, so that their actions are informed by compassion, by wisdom, by patience. And if they could learn these skills, because these are skills, we think peace is just pops into our head, but it's something that we learn and practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's very interesting. So children can bring past life traumas into this lifetime. So are those the types of things that you also want to help heal?
It is from time to time something that does happen. The best thing to do in that case is not to reinforce that. Right? We want to have them naturally forget it. And we've had a number of children that had that similar sort of situation when they would recall and say, I recall being a fighter jet pilot. And the child would play a video game. The point of the video game was to fly your plane to somewhere. But they were so interested in the crashing element. Crash, crash, crash was as if that was the goal of the game. And then later they would say that, I crashed, right? But the thing to do, like I said, is to allow them to forget it, because we don't want that to sort of haunt them in their life and to inform their actions and their behaviors. So wipe that and onwards into this new life that they have.
So interesting. And so what is the difference? There has to be some sort of difference, I'd imagine, between adult meditation and children meditating. What's the difference there? How do you get children to sit still?
So, yes, the biggest challenge is keeping them interested. And the way we do it, for example, right now in our Calm Junior and our Calm Kids programs, we use a light that very smoothly turns on and off, and they practice synchronizing the breathing with that rhythm of the light. We also use gizmos, since they like gizmos, so we do have some little biofeedback devices that they put on their finger that tells them what their nervous system response is, measuring galvanic skin resistance, and that way they could have a sort of proof that this works. And we reinforce that you can use this anywhere you go, whether it's your breathing, whether it's your pursed lip breathing, whether it's your what we call sky meditation, which we have them sometimes go outside and grab a piece of a perfectly blue sky and have the snapshot of that in their mind. And in a moment of emotional turmoil, say, to imagine having the wind, if you will, waft away the clouds in the same way that it wafts away their, whether it's anxiety or stress, or maybe they're upset or confused or sad. So imagine that as clouds that simply dissipate into the blue sky.
Do you do that with adults too?
Adults, we use different techniques. Adults have more noise than children do. Children mind noise is that of inquiry. Everything's interesting and it's very sort of fizzy. Adult mind noise, on the other hand, is more ego-based. So a lot of comparison and a lot of worries, projecting the mind into the future, causing anxieties, throwing the mind into the past, causing sort of depressive patterns of thinking. And so with adults, we do have more mind-focused meditation practices. With the children, on the other hand, we do a little bit of meditation, and then we do games, focus games.
Oh, yeah. I'd like that.
So they love a game in Korean we call samyukgu, which means 3, 6, 9.
Samyukgu?
Yes.
Samyukgu.
And they sit in a circle and they count 1, 2, and anytime there's a number 3, 6, or 9, you clap instead of counting. So it'll be 1, 2, clap, 3, 4, 5, clap. And once you get to 30, 31, 32, 33. If you got two, 33, for example, it's two claps. So it's a fun game in a circle in a group, but it also causes them to focus, right? Especially when you get, like I said, get to the 30s, no one's talking. You have to keep up in your mind.
They have to listen and be present.
Yes.
Right? So that's what that's about. Interesting. And you said that the program is called CALM.
CALM.
What does that stand for?
Initially, the CALM program was actually designed, it was a collaboration between myself and Venerable Musang Sanim, so Dr. Lambert, who's one of our monks who now is a clinical psychologist. So the outline for the CALM program, the curriculum for the CALM program, albeit a little bit devised by now, was initially his dissertation paper.
Oh,
Yes.
Talk about success.
Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yes, and he would tell you if you ask him. We have run this program. He's been a psychologist at the public schools, so we've run the program in public schools. He's taught it to the counselors at the schools, et cetera, et cetera. So it's far-reaching.
Wow, wow, that's very impressive and very much needed. Very much needed. And we will be right back. So, can you talk a little about the fundamentals of Zen philosophy and how we could use that, incorporate that in our day-to-day lives?
The first thing that we need to address on individual levels is our ego. The ego flare-up makes for majority of the problems. And the function of the ego predominantly is not only in thinking that I am best and greatest and know best, but also it runs a comparison all the time. So when we are anytime met with new information, no matter how fabulous the information may be, the ego automatically compares it to the information that we already have, right? And in doing so, then it decides whether it likes it, quote unquote, or doesn't like it, quote unquote.
Okay.
And what it likes is the things that it has liked already. So it just collects more of the same.
Okay.
And what it doesn't like, it's the things that are foreign to it. And so it obstructs really learning, and it obstructs absorption of new information. And so as adults, the older we grow, the more rigid, in a sense, we become. Rigid in body and rigid in mind, rigid in perspective, rigid in point of view. That rigidness we call kojong kwanyom.
I don't know if I can say that. Say that again.
Kojong
Kojong
kwanyom.
Kwanyom.
Right, which simply means this rigid adherence to a paradigm, to a perspective.
Interesting. Okay. Wow, that's pretty intense. And what could you? I mean, you talked about ego, and I think ego is also the thing that keeps us separate.
Yes.
And thinking that we're not connected to anything or anyone but ourselves. And I think we see that a lot today in the world, just with there's so much fighting and, everything that's been going on, all the upheaval. How does Zen have any perspective on that, on separateness and how we deal with that in the world?
Absolutely. So, like you said, ego plays a big role in that. We have to remember, however, that we each individually have a sameness. And that sameness we call Buddha nature, or true self, right? The real me, if you will, right? And so my real self and your real self, namely the essence of who we are, is the same. This is the sameness. This is the unifying field from which we exist out of. Now, ego makes us think that you are all the way over there and I am all the way over here.
Right.
So if we suffer, even though we think that that person's suffering is their individual suffering, what suffering can arise from a human mind in one mind can arise in another. So there's a singularity, if you will, to the human experience, even though we believe it to be divided. Now, having said that, even though we are in fact equal and same, we do have to acknowledge one's individuality. So we are now entering into a place where we have to hold two ideas in our mind simultaneously, namely the individual and the collective, or the individuation without division. Meaning we can be our own selves. You could be you, I could be me. This is our idiosyncrasies, our whatever, whether it's religious persuasion, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's political orientation. That's you, that's me, right? But there's a sameness between us. We are the same and simultaneously different. And if we could hold the sameness in our hearts and acknowledge the differences, then we could be individuals without necessarily creating the separation and cleaving one from the other.
So it's really truly being a blended being,
Yes.
bringing the spiritual and the physical together, because we are spiritual beings having a physical experience.
And acknowledging that the other person
Is also
is the same.
Yes, yes, yes. I got that.
Right. And so, this leads to sometimes a confusion where then, when taken to an extreme point of view, we think that then people should not be held responsible because sameness is sort of stagnation, right? But each individual person is responsible for their actions, and they should be held accountable and be accountable for their own action.
Yes.
Which again, the accountability doesn't take away the sameness.
Right.
These two things must absolutely exist within our minds simultaneously.
Right.
And that's a balance of then the sameness and the individual, and they're not in clashing with one another.
And the growth of one promotes the growth of all.
Yes.
And you hurt one, you hurt all.
Yes.
So, yes, that makes complete sense to me. And we will be